This is station KE2XCC at Alpine, New Jersey. Our programs this evening are in honor of the builder and owner of this station.
Marconi was a Nobel Prize-winning physicist and inventor credited with the groundbreaking work necessary for all future radio technology. Through his experiments in wireless telegraphy, Marconi developed the first effective system of radio communication. In 1899, he founded the Marconi Telegraph Company. In 1901, he successfully sent wireless signal across the Atlantic Ocean, disproving the dominant belief of the Earth's curvature affecting transmission. Marconi shared with Carl Braun the 1909 Nobel Prize in Physics. He died in Rome in 1937.
Now we are going to talk about invention of radio. Marconi is often credited as the inventor of radio as a young man living in Italy. Marconi read a biography of Heinrich Hertz, who had written and experimented with early forms of wireless transmission. Marconi then duplicated Hertz's experiments in his own home, successfully sending transmission from one side to his attic to the other. He saw the potential for the technology and approached the Italian government for support. When the government showed no interest in his ideas, Marconi moved to England and took out a patent on his device, rather than inventing radio from scratch. However, Marconi essentially combined the ideas and experiments of other people to make them into a useful communication tool. In fact, long-distance electronic communication has existed since the middle of the 19th century. The telegraph communicated messages through a series of long and short clicks. Cables across the Atlantic Ocean connected even the far distant United States and England using this technology. By the 1870s, telegraph technology had been used to develop the telephone, which could transmit an individual voice over the same cables used by its predecessor. When Marconi popularized wireless technology, contemporaries initially viewed it as a way to allow the telegraph to function in places that could not be connected by cables. Early radio acted as device for naval ships to communicate with other ships and with land stations. The focus was on person-to-person communication. Now we are discuss about broadcasting. The technology needed to build a radio transmitter and receiver was relatively simple, and the knowledge to build such devices soon reached the public. Amateur radio operators quickly crowded the airwaves, broadcasting messages to anyone within range. By 1912, incurred government regulatory measures that required licenses and limit broadcast ranges for radio operation, and his regulation also gave the president the power to shut down all stations, a power notably exercised in 1917 upon the United States entry into World War I to keep amateur radio operators from interfering with military use of radio waves for the duration of the war. Less technology made radio as it is known today possibly, but its modern practical function as a mass communication medium had been the domain of other technologies for some time. As early as the 1880s, people relied on telephones to transmit news, music, church, sermons, and weather reports. In Budapest, Hungary, for example, a subscription service allowed individuals to listen to news reports and fictional stories on their telephone's time. Telephones also transmitted opera performances from Paris to London. In 1909, the innovation emerged in the United States as a pay-per-play phonograph service in Wilmington, Delaware. They allowed subscribers to listen to specific music recordings on their telephones. In Massachusetts, resident Reginald Fessenden initiated the first radio transmission of the human voice, but his efforts did not develop into a useful application. 10 years later, La DeForest used radio in a more modern sense when he set up an experimental radio station in New York. Now we are going to talk about Act of 1927 of radio. In the mid-1920s, profit-seeking companies such as department stores and newspapers owned a majority of the nation's broadcast radio stations, which promoted their owners' businesses on profit groups such as churches and schools operated another third of the station. As the number of radio stations outgrew, the available frequency interference became problematic, and the government stepped into the fray. The Radio Act of 1927 established the Federal Radio Commission oversee regulation of the airwaves. A year and its creation, the FRC reallocated station bandwidths to correct interference problem. The organization reserved 40 high-powered channels, setting aside 37 of these for network affiliates. The remaining 600 lower-powered bandwidths went to stations that had to share the frequencies. This meant that as one station went off the air at a designated time, another one began broadcasting in its place. The Radio Act of 1927 allowed major networks such as CBS and NBC to gain a 70% share of US broadcasting by the early 1930s, earning them $72,000 million in a profit by 1934. Non-profit broadcasting fell to only 2% of the market. Of the favor that the 1927 Radio Act showed toward commercial broadcasting struggling non-profit radio broadcasters created the National Committee on Education by Radio to lobby for more outlets, basing their argument on the notion that the airwaves, unlike newspapers, were a public resource. They asserted that groups working for the people good should take precedence over commercial interest. Nevertheless, the Communication Act of 1934 passed without addressing these issues, and radio continued as a mainly commercial enterprise. Okay, so now we are going to talk about radio impact on culture. Mass media such as newspaper had been around for years before the existence of radio. In fact, radio was initially considered a kind of disembodied newspaper, although this idea gave early proponents a useful, familiar way to think about radio. It underestimated radio's power as a medium. Newspapers had the potential to reach a wide audience, but radio had the potential to reach almost everyone. Neither illiteracy nor even a busy schedule impeded radio's success. One could now perform an activity and listen to the radio at the same time. This unprecedented reach made radio an instrument of social cohesion, as it brought together members of different classes and backgrounds to experience the world as a nation. Radio programs reflected this nationwide cultural aspect of radio. Vox Pop, a show originally based on person in the street interviews, was an early attempt to quantify the United States' growing mass culture. Beginning in 1935, the program billed itself as an unrehearsed cross-section of what the average person really knows by asking some random people an assortment of questions. Many modern television shows still employ this format, not only for viewers' amusement and information, but also as an attempt to sum up national culture. cultural level as an acknowledgement of radio's entrance into people's private lives to make them public. Was more than just a quick way to find out about events, it was a way for US citizens to experience events with the same emotions. During the Ohio and Mississippi River floods of 1937, radio brought the voices of those who suffered as well as the voices of those who fought the rising tides. A West Virginia newspaper explained the strength of radio in providing an emotional voice during such crises. Thanks to radio, the nation as a whole has had its nerves, its hearts, its souls exposed to the needs of its unfortunates. We are a nation integrated and interdependent. We are our brother's keeper. Okay, so now we are going to talk about podcasting, and this one is the last topic of our documentary. Unlike internet radio, podcasting employs downloadable rather than streamed programs. The term podcasting itself stems from the use of MP3 players such as Apple's iPod to use programs on demand. Many terrestrial stations have employed podcasting to supplement their traditional over-the-air broadcasting. Because these are single programs rather than continuous stations, podcasts are an easier medium to produce than is internet radio. Some podcast producers such as Mignog Fogarty have created programs that led to book deals and a steady income. Fogarty's Weekly Grammar Girl Quick and Dirty Tricks podcast focuses on simple grammar rules. Within a year of its inception, this podcast ranked up 1 million downloads and received national acclaim. Podcasting does not fit neatly into the traditional concept of radio. Yet, there is no question then it is following in the footsteps of past radio programs, and that it provides a potential vision of the medium's place in the years to come. Just as radio evolved from a medium for soap operas and live music to talk shows and recorded music, podcasts are a window into what radio may evolve into in the future. Okay, this is our documentary on radio. Thanks everyone for watching this video. We hope you like our video, and if you have any query, then please ask in our comment section. Jazakallah, Allah Hafiz.